Welcome to the Good Divorce Show, where we can help you learn how to navigate the journey of divorce with less conflict, less debt, and equip you not to just get divorced, but also learn how to be divorced. Your host, certified divorce coach Karen McNenny, shares her wealth of knowledge, gets advice from other relationship experts, and interviews couples who learn how to have a good divorce, so you can too. Now here's your host, Karen.
Hello and welcome to the Good Divorce Show. I am your good divorce coach, Karen McNenny, here to help you navigate through the complex world of divorce, providing therapeutic services as well as mediation, co-parent counseling, and guidance as you navigate what can otherwise be a really hard landscape. And today I'm super excited because we have lawyer turned coach, Karen Covy. She is also a mediator, author, speaker, and podcaster. She coaches 6, 7, and 8-figure professionals and business owners all over the world to make clear, confident decisions during highly charged emotional situations, which we know divorce falls into that category. Karen helps her clients become the CEO of their own divorce so they can navigate through this difficult life transition with less conflict, less expense, less damage to themselves and their children. Amen to that. She is also the author of When Happily Ever After Ends, How to Survive Your Divorce Emotionally, Financially, and Legally. Karen is the creator of the online divorce program, the Divorce Roadmap 3.0, and How to Successfully Mediate Your Divorce. She is also the host of the podcast, Off the Fence, Mastering Decision Making, Divorce, and more. You can connect with Karen on Facebook, Instagram, X, LinkedIn, YouTube. We'll make sure you know all the places. To begin, go on over to KarenCovy.com. That's COVY. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited for our conversation.
Well, all of us have a bit of a backstory of how we ended up here. And I don't know about you, but I get the conversation question, why do you want to hang out with divorced people? That sounds terrible. And you have been doing it for 30 years. What brought you into this arena and what keeps you?
Those are interesting questions. So just my backstory, I am not divorced, never have been divorced. But I started my own law practice, about 30 years ago. And I said, when I started it, I will take any kind of case there is except divorce. And you know what happens when you make plans, God or the universe or whatever you call the power that is, laughs. And somebody was laughing at me because I had the proverbial shingle out, and people kept coming to me and they'd say, Karen, can you help me with my divorce? Karen, do you know a good divorce lawyer? And this just kept happening and happening. And finally, I just literally threw my hands up in the air, looked up at the sky and said, okay, I get it. I'll do divorce. And I haven't looked back since, because I found that in divorce, I have an opportunity to make a real difference for people. But because I had been a trial lawyer, like I tried jury cases, put 12 in a box and let's rock and roll. And I did that before I ever set foot in a divorce court. When I got to divorce court, what I saw didn't make sense to me. I was a lawyer, and what I saw was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Why? Why did you think that? What was happening?
First of all, it makes sense to me. If you've got, let's just take a malpractice case, or a personal injury case, or a case where, the CEO of some big corporation intentionally manufactured a drug that hurts babies and they knew it, but they did it anyway. Okay, I can put him on the stand and rip his face off in cross-examination. But when you're talking about that's your spouse or soon to be ex-spouse, the other parent of your child, and you have to sit next to that person at your kid's soccer game, there is no universe where that makes sense. None. And the system, and that's what we do, right? The court system was never designed to handle family problems.
Yep. And judges don't want to have you in your courtroom anyway.
No. There's a judge. I happen to know a judge who will remain nameless, but we've been friends going back for years. And she says, look, when you as litigants, you and your ex or soon to be ex, walk into my courtroom and you can't make decisions for your children, you are giving your children to me. and I will make the decision. You might not like it. You probably won't. But if you can't decide it for yourself, there is no other, I have no alternative.
So there you are, litigating in family court, building relationships with judges, being a divorce lawyer, but somewhere along the line, there was a fork in the road.
Yeah, from the minute I got in there, I said, this makes no sense to me. So I started looking for a better way, right? So I almost immediately became a mediator. And I have to tell you, this was when mediation wasn't cool, right? Nobody would do mediation. It's kind of like coaching has taken a long time to get traction in this world.
Yep.
Mediation took a long time to get traction back in the day. And so I became a mediator. I'm like, well, that's better, but it's still not fixing the problem. I became a collaborative divorce lawyer. I became an arbitrator. I did all of the things. And finally, I realized that fundamentally, the system doesn't work. But as one person, I don't have the bandwidth or the ability to change the whole system. Yeah. But I can change the system for my clients. I can change the way my clients go through it. And so ultimately, that's what I decided to do.
And you became a divorce coach.
And I became a divorce coach.
In fact, you and I trained in the same CDC program, which were really pioneers in this space. Yeah. And helping. And as you know, there's a lot of lawyers who were our classmates like you that said, I don't want to be in this place of feuding. We can help families do it differently. So can you dig a little bit deeper into that of how your practice has changed over time and what it currently looks like in the services that you provide for families?
Well, when I started, I naively thought, well, I can do both, right? I can do it all because I'm Superwoman, but I'm not. And I found that out pretty quickly. And what I realized as a lawyer, people don't think about this, but I really didn't have control over my schedule or my time. And here's what I mean. I could be working as a coach and have tomorrow completely booked out with client appointments. And then at 5:00 tonight, I get notice of an emergency motion that says be in court at 8:30 tomorrow morning. And there goes my day. And I don't have a choice. And I started doing this pre-COVID when everything was real court. There was no Zoom court, right? And now most places have gone to some sort of a hybrid system, but it's still entirely possible that, a lawyer at the drop of a hat would have to go running off into court. As a matter of fact, I remember a story from back in the day where it was, again, a family court matter, and there was an order of protection about something, right? And I just happened to be in the courtroom when this happened, and some lawyer comes flying into court. Somebody, one lawyer in a case came in with an emergency, order for an order of protection on something or other. I don't remember if it was money or what it was, but the other lawyer he got notice like 10 minutes before they were walking into court. So he's flying into court, like putting his suit jacket on. He'd been in the office, right? Didn't have a tie, just putting his suit jacket on, running into court, sweating like like a pig. And he's standing in front of the judge. And he's like, Your Honor, I just found out blah, blah, blah. And this was back years ago when courts were different. They were way more strict. And the lawyer said, counsel, you're not wearing a tie. And he's like, but Your Honor, and he's like, I'm sorry, you are not dressed appropriately for this court. So the guy ran back into the hallway, borrowed a tie from some other lawyer who was in the hallway, puts it back on, and came in and argued because he had gotten short notice because it was an emergency. So he came in and he had to argue this case. That's what the life of a litigator is like sometimes. People don't understand how stressful it is, and they get upset because their lawyer doesn't return their calls, or their lawyer, it takes a while for their lawyer to respond to them. This is kind of part of the reason why. It's because the whole system is upside down.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So the shift now, are you only doing coaching? Yeah. Have you... And for our listeners who are just curious about this and what it means and I think you and I both have identified that one of the ways families get it wrong is they call a lawyer first. And Karen and I just want to say, call a coach first. And when you call a coach first, this is what you get. Lay it out for us.
Yeah, this is this is one of my own personal pet peeves. I'm so happy we're on the same page about it, because one of the biggest mistakes that people make is calling their lawyer first, because number one, oftentimes they don't understand what they're facing. They haven't been able to educate themselves about the process. They don't know how it works. And one of the early decisions that I believe a couple, or a person needs to make is, how do you want to do this? Right?
Yeah.
Look at your situation, know your spouse, know what you're dealing with, but do you want to use mediation? Do you want to try collaborative divorce? Do you know that you're gonna have to litigate? Can you sit down at the kitchen table and work at least some of these things out? How do you want to do this? And the problem is, when you go to a lawyer first, what people don't understand is that the lawyer is going to sell you on the process, not that's right for you, but that's what the lawyer does, right? So the litigator is going to say, I will protect your rights. We have to go to court. I'll fight for you. The lawyer who is more mediation friendly will go, we can work this out. The collaborative lawyer will say, oh, no, collaborative divorce, that's the process you want to use. And people think that the lawyer is telling them what's best for them. But what the lawyer is saying is, this is what I do, and you're going to do what I do. So it makes so much more sense to start by saying, what process do I want to use? And if you don't know the answer to that, because you wouldn't, who would, right? Go talk to a coach. Talk to a coach, figure that out. And then, this is a concept, find the lawyer who's good at that.
Yes.
Right? Because they're different skill sets. Mm-hmm. Right? You take a lawyer who's really, really good at negotiation, but not good in court. If you're in court, you don't have the lawyer that you might need, and vice versa. Right? You go to, if you're going to mediation and you've got the shark litigator, I have watched lawyers, I have been a mediator, right? I've watched lawyers blow up mediations. I won't say on purpose, but it looked like on purpose.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. And what's coming to mind is this concept of divorce by default and divorce by design. And what we're fed in the public and what we believe, because when we get married, nobody's planning on a divorce and we don't talk about it and we don't educate it because it's just too hot, that then you end up with a divorce by default, like just whatever comes your way and you're just trying to scramble through it. But you can design your divorce with the help of someone like Karen. So if I were your client, what would I expect by way of services and guidance? One is an education on all the different ways you can get divorced. What's the right fit for your family? And then we start moving down that path.
Right.
What's the value you bring?
It's an education about everything you need to know. The one superpower, and I know you were involved in business for a very long time, and one of the most important skills or abilities for a business, and I would argue for any human, is the ability to anticipate what's coming. Well, you can't anticipate in a divorce if you don't understand what the next step is, what the system looks like. So I created something that I've called the Divorce Roadmap 3.0. It's an online divorce program, and I created a framework, a structure. When you go through a divorce, you are going to go through these 10 steps in pretty much this order that they appear, maybe a little different depending on your process. But if you know that and you know what your next step is, first of all, your anxiety level comes way down because you're not dealing with as much of the unknown as you would otherwise be. And the second thing is, you can get prepared. You can make a plan. I love your wording of divorce by design. And I know that for some people, they would have a problem with the wording of that because it makes it feel like, oh, you planned this and that's wrong. And, like we get all up into our heads about all these rules that I don't know who made up, but society says this is bad or this is wrong. Why? Some people spend years planning their wedding.
That's right.
And I think statistically speaking, the more you've put into planning a wedding in terms of budget, the shorter the marriage tends to be before you have huge problems. But that's a different discussion.
Yeah, I have heard that correlation. Is it causal? Is it correlation? It's hard to say.
I don't know. I have no idea.
what we want to say to you listeners is to empower you to know that in the same way that you did design your wedding and all the things that you wanted to have happen and what that marriage was going to look like afterwards, your divorce can be the same way. And we're not being tongue in cheek. We know that it is a death of a family, and there is grief, and there is pain, and there is hardship. So we're here to help you do it in a way with less pain and grief and destruction and debt.
Exactly. And, is it ever going to be easy? No. I mean, of
No.
course not. But, you know, what's the healthiest way to do it is to feel all the feelings. And I know that Karen, you help your clients do exactly that. You have to feel them, deal with them, and then you can work through them. Because fundamentally, you want to be in a position at the end of your divorce to look back and say, okay, that was a bump in the road. That was a blip on the radar screen of my life. It did
Yeah.
not become the defining moment of my life. And then you end up bitter and broken and angry and in therapy for decades. And
Mhm.
who needs that? That's no way to live.
Yeah, I try to remind my clients where, your marriage is ending. If you share children, your relationship is not. So we're going to renovate your relationship, not burn it to the ground. You're going to need it. You need to have some, presence of a compassionate, respectful co-parent relationship going forward. It's just going to make your life better.
And it's going to make your children's lives better. People,
Yes. Yes.
people forget children don't learn by what you say, they learn by what they see.
Oh, that is brilliant. Before we go into a break, I want to ask you about that day in court because you've lived it and you have seen it. And I think that people underestimate or just are under knowledged about what they are looking for. And like you said, you're giving up a lot of your rights and handing it over to the judge. Can you paint a picture of the day in court?
Okay, first of all, the first picture I'm going to paint is 95% of the time it never happens, right? 90 to 95% of divorce cases settle, right? So that means you never get your day in court. But if you do, and when you do, it's not television, right? Television, they edit out and they only show you the juicy parts because otherwise you'd be bored. Most of divorce court is like, if you go to a divorce trial, you want to pull your hair out half the time because a lot of it's foundational questions, it's boring stuff, it's objections and judges rulings and this and that. It's not exciting. And the court is run by very specific rules. If you think you are going to get on the witness stand and tell the judge about all the horrible things your spouse has done and what a horrible human they are and how you should get everything or at least everything that you want because they're just, a jerk, I am here to tell you that never, ever, ever happens, right?
Mm.
There are rules about what you can say. You can't just talk. You have to be answering questions that a lawyer asked you. Even if you don't have a lawyer, if you're going pro se, then the judge, you may get a little bit more leeway, but so much of what you want to tell the court isn't legally relevant. I'm not saying it doesn't matter,
Right.
but it's not legally relevant. You never get to say it, and you never get the chance to just tell your story. That's why you want someone like a therapist or a divorce coach or both so that you can get all of that out because it's important, but it's
Yes.
not legally relevant. So you're never going to get the chance.
Mm. Is there an illustrative story that comes to mind of anyone that you saw kind of walk through that journey that might really make it real for our listeners?
Well, it's interesting because I don't have, I wasn't there, but I have a client that I worked with as a legal consultant, right? So and this was a very high net worth individual, right? But he and his wife they worked out most of the details of what they thought they wanted. And he worked with me to say, okay, now tell me what's legally feasible. And I'm going to hire you to write the paperwork representing the agreement that we have. I'm like, cool, awesome. I can do that. So I wrote up the paperwork and it was quite extensive. They had children, so they had all of the parenting stuff. They had all of the financial stuff. And the two of them were on the same page, and they wanted what you and I would call a good divorce. So I said, I can't represent both of you, at least not in Illinois under these circumstances. And I'm not going to go to court with you, but I'll write up the paperwork, and then you can hire a lawyer to go to court with you, or you can walk yourself through the system. He said, I'm a smart guy. I think I can figure this out. I'm like, okay, God bless. Here's the forms. Here's how you do it, blah, blah, blah. Off he goes. They got it. They get everything worked out. And it was a negotiation process to get it all done. They walk into court, and the judge hated him. The judge is like, what do you mean you don't have a lawyer? She doesn't have a lawyer. You don't have a lawyer. And what they were doing was a little bit unusual. They were doing an income share rather than specifically designating this is child support. This is, spousal support. This is, blah, 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 right? They structured their agreement differently, but it was more generous than what would ever have happened under quote unquote normal situation. The judge read them the Riot Act. The judge said, no, you need to talk to a lawyer, and I don't think you can do this. And you're trying to pull a fast one, and she doesn't understand what's going on. And then the judge was berating the woman for not working. And the soon-to-be ex-husband, he had to jump in and say, excuse me, Your Honor, but she's been raising our 3 children, and I think that is working, and she's been doing a damn good job of it for all of the. So he's in there defending her. She's like falling apart. And the judge didn't want to hear any of it. Ended up saying, I think you two need to go talk to some lawyers and have, come back when you have lawyers present. And the interesting thing was, they had sat in that courtroom all morning long and watched the judge divorce people who didn't have money. But because their income was at a certain level and their assets were at a certain level, the judge determined that it wasn't fair if they did it themselves, that something must be fishy, that somebody was pulling a fast one. And it was probably him, because he was the one that was making the big money while she was raising the kids. And they, long story short, continued the case, and they have to go back.
Oh, my goodness. So listeners, this is a hard lesson and a hard thing to hear. And I know for both of us in this conversation today, there's great discord in the legal system, and it has grown up around family law. Make sure you're educated. And Karen, before we head to the break, because sometimes people don't get back to part 2 today, you mentioned a tool that you have. And if you would just let people know about your 3.0 and where to find that, so at least they have a little nugget. And then when we come back from the break, we're going to hear more from Karen about the better side of divorce through her lens. So where can people find you in that tool?
The easiest place to find me is on my website, KarenCovy.com. That's COVY.com. And if you look under the tab that says Work with Karen, you'll find the Divorce Roadmap 3.0. You can click on it. It's right there.
Fantastic. Stay tuned. We're going to be back with Karen Covy, lawyer, mediator, arbitrator, divorce coach, and wise woman. Stay tuned.
Are you thinking about getting divorced? Before you call a lawyer, call the Good Divorce Coach, Karen McNenny, a certified divorce counselor, co-parenting specialist, and mediator. Karen's signature Good Divorce experience will guide you through your divorce journey, from the day you make that difficult decision to the day the decree is signed, all for a predictable fee. The Good Divorce Coach will teach you and your partner how to get divorced and be divorced with less conflict and less debt. Visit thegooddivorcecoach.com to get in touch with Karen.
Now, back to the show with Karen.
Hello, listeners. Thanks for sticking with us today. It is well worth your time, and I appreciate you setting aside time to learn here on the Good Divorce Show how you can navigate the journey, the complex journey of divorce, with less despair, destruction, and debt. And guiding us today is Karen Covy, 30 years in the industry, plus an author of Happily Ever After Ends, When Happily Ever After Ends, How to Survive Your Divorce Emotionally, Financially, and Legally. Karen, would you take us into your perspective of what makes a good divorce, and maybe even where people get it wrong that keeps them from the good divorce experience.
I think that a good divorce is one where each person respects the other one. So it's full of dignity and respect, right?
Oh,
You look,
amen.
you might not like your spouse at this point in life, right? You might not, you probably don't agree with them. That's okay. But if you can just respect them as a human, if you can treat them with dignity and treat them as, especially if you have kids, as the co-parent of your children,
Yes,
that mindset is going to influence how you act and interact. And it's going to keep things on more of an even keel. And, I know this is something, Karen, that you talk about too, which is the business of divorce. If you can separate in yourself your emotions from the business aspect, that's going to go a long way towards preserving that dignity and respect and getting the business part done. Because what I have seen in all the years that I've been doing this is that once you're out of the thick of it, out of the heat of the divorce, it's done and you can move on, amazing things can happen. Now you have the ability not only to heal yourself, but to start to heal your relationship, which you're going to need as a co-parent. I mean, you may never have the relationship. You're not going to have the romantic relationship you did. You may or may not have the friendship. You may, but it takes time to heal, to get through all of the hurt, the anger, the anxiety, the all the things. And then you're out on the other side. But you can't really start that healing journey if you're still in the middle of a contested divorce. Can't.
that's it. Going through divorce is different than recovering from a divorce, is different from, no, I'm just a divorced person.
Yeah.
Right? Those different stages. And I always think a lot of people in retrospect, like, oh, eventually we started getting along, and oh, eventually it just got better, and oh, eventually we stopped having that. Well, if eventually was a car with a gas pedal and a brake, you're the driver, listener. You can actually speed up that eventually and choose to just shed some of the crap from the past, which is not dismissing that it happened, betrayals, pain, hurt, all of those things. But you don't have to carry it around as long as some of us do.
Yeah. And it's not easy. It's not easy to let go. A lot of us, I don't know why, maybe it's conditioning from when we were children. I mean, you want to hang on to the hurt in a weird way,
Yeah.
so that until you can process it. But then the sooner you can start doing that, the sooner you live a happy life.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to, I mean, yes, you may be divorced, but you don't want to make that the defining moment of your life.
No, no. So if I understand correctly, if I hire you, I'm going through divorce. I mean, I get so much education from you because you've been living in this world. You really do bring so much. But as my coach, what would a general engagement look like? Where, when, and how, and what would we be talking about?
My coaching is highly customized to the person. So it's not like, oh, it's our second meeting, we're going to talk about blah, blah, blah. No, 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 that's not the way it goes. What do you need? Where are you at? What's your next step? So to me, coaching is three things. It's number one, education. Number two, application of what you've learned to your circumstances. Because you can have all the knowledge in the world. If you don't know what to do with it, it doesn't matter. And then it's preparation and it's planning, right? It's cutting through the overwhelm. So what I bring is I am the guide that helps my clients understand what's going on, make sense of what's going on, and then make a plan. Get prepared and make a plan, because a lot of this, I mean, divorce is a document-driven process.
Right.
And you've got to be organized. The more you can do in terms of information gathering, and then not just gather it, but put things together in the way that your lawyer or your financial advisor or your professional is going to be able to use them, that will save you an enormous amount of time, an enormous amount of money, and an enormous amount of grief and aggravation as you and the lawyer go back and forth with the lawyer saying, I need this piece of paper. And you're like, oh, and it takes 3 months to get that. And you don't want, and it becomes this big monkey on your back that you have to do this and that and the other thing. I'll tell you a little story. I had a client and she was just paralyzed by the divorce. It wasn't something that she saw coming. And it turned out her husband was a serial cheater. He'd been having a series of affairs, all the things. She was devastated and she was paralyzed. And so she hired a lawyer, and the lawyer said, and gave her a list of documents. I need all this stuff. And she would just look at it and couldn't move. Right. And so she engaged me and we started talking about it and talking through it. And I was able to explain to her, okay, this is what the lawyer needs and this is why, and this is how you put it together. And she was still kind of lethargic about the whole thing until I said, all right. And I'm thinking how to organize things, right? The old envelope method. I don't know if you knew about that. You put things and you organize them by folder or envelope. So I'm talking to her about that. And I said, or, you could put it all in a spreadsheet, but most people, and she perked up immediately and went, Spreadsheet? I love spreadsheets. And she had worked with spreadsheets in the last job that she had. And turns out she was a whiz at Excel, loved it. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, most lawyers don't know how to work with Excel. They're not great with spreadsheets, but it's an organized way of presenting information. And when you give them one, they can look at it and get it, right? So I found the way to get her excited about it. She spent the entire next weekend putting things together like a crazy person. I don't even know if she slept all weekend long. So her lawyer had been hounding her for months and months and months. She was about to fire the lawyer because the lawyer was saying, because she was saying, I don't know if this is the right lawyer for me, blah, blah, blah. The lawyer was about to fire her as a client because she's like, I can't help you if you don't give me the tools, right? She walks into the lawyer's office with binders and organized and a spreadsheet. And the lawyer's like, what happened to you? I have never seen any client that was this organized and this prepared. And it turned out that in her particular case, because her husband was having a series of affairs, he was spending money on these things. That's called, depending on the state you're in, either wasting or dissipation. Or the point is, all of that money, if she could show that he spent $1 million on women, on other women, then that $1 million would get added back into the marital estate, and she was entitled to receive some of that. Well, because she had done this work, she gave it to the lawyer. The lawyer had everything she needed to go to the other lawyer and say, yeah, I think you better talk to your guy, and I think he probably wants to settle this.
Aha.
Which they did.
This really is the value of having a coach. And I love this spirit of being client-centered. I couldn't agree more. You don't know what your client's going to need until you're in the conversation with the client. And then our job, I always say it's like being a river guide and being a mountain girl. Like, you can only read the river as it comes. You can't get too far ahead, and you never know what blew down last night into the river. But I'm curious, especially because you are a lawyer, this relationship with lawyers and coaching. And when we show up on the scene, and when they see us as an ally, when they see us as an adversary, when we're helping, how they appreciate, like, how can we better help lawyers to understand our role and that we really are there to help the client and make their job easier, I would suspect.
Absolutely. I am very, like you, I'm very client-centered, right? There is no question in my mind where my loyalty goes, and that is to my clients. And so it's the client's decision when they hire me, do you want your lawyer to know about me or do you not? And some say, yes, I do. And others say, no, I don't. And one of the things, because I have a legal background, one of the things that I can help prepare my clients for and do is any kind of mediation, any kind of court hearing, a trial. I understand what trial preparation looks like. I had a client one time that called me up, and she had a trial, like the actual trial coming up, and her husband had not want to settle anything, like wouldn't agree to literally anything the entire process. So now they have a trial date, and she was petrified, absolutely petrified about going to court. And so I said, look, I can, she contacted me. Can you help prepare me? I said, yes. But in a perfect world, it would be great to team with your lawyer so I know what the lawyer's theory of the case is. What does she consider important? What does she not consider important? On and on and on. So see if your lawyer will, want me as part of the team. So the client goes back and she comes back and she said, Karen, the lawyer said, absolutely not. I will prepare you for court. You don't need a coach. That's crazy, blah, blah, blah. Well, what the lawyer didn't realize was this client's anxiety was like up here. She was going to be a terrible witness because she was so scared. And somebody needed to work with her to bring that down. And then she was a fabulous witness. So I said, look, your lawyer, it's up to you whether you then continue to work with me or not. And she said, no, I really believe in you. I think this is the way to go. She and I worked together. And so we worked for, 8 or 10 weeks, getting her ready for court, going over, this is how this is what matters. This is what doesn't. Make sure you give your lawyer this, tell your lawyer this, this is how you show up. This is how you dress. This is how you answer a question so that you're doing it with authority and you're not rambling off into the Neverlands. Right. So anyways, we get her all the way up to the day of trial. It was actually, I think, a couple of days before trial. Meanwhile, her lawyer had not done anything to prepare her. Zero. I said, she's going to call you the day before. The day before, the lawyer calls her up and says, come on in, let's get ready for trial. If she had done that, she would have been a mess. Her energy would have been all scattered. She would have been and it would have been physically really bad for her, right? Because she had some health issues and she didn't want to be that stressed out. Long story short, because she was prepared and she walked in, she never thought it would happen. But on the day of trial, her husband made an offer and they settled.
Oh, wow.
But that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Without you there. So sometimes you're kind of an invisible partner.
Sometimes I'm invisible.
To the lawyer. Yeah. Why, you're a lawyer. Why are lawyers so territorial about this?
I can see it kind of in my case because they're afraid that I'm going to say, well, why didn't the lawyer file this motion or do this thing? Or, here's the thing. Even when I'm working with, a client, the lawyer doesn't even know I'm there or does know I'm there. I'm not there to second guess a lawyer. I'm not going to armchair quarterback that lawyer. I don't know what that lawyer is dealing with in the court system in this particular case because I'm not there. That's not my job. And so I will tell people, this is what you need to ask your lawyer. This is how to work with your lawyer. This is all the things. So I actually help the lawyers, whether they realize it or not, because I'm making I'm giving them better clients. But at the same time, the client is getting a better lawyer because now the lawyer's headspace is free to do their job, which is the legal end of it, argue in court, do the motions and the documents and talk to the judge and do all of those things. That's a job. That's what they're doing. And in a perfect world, if we can work together as a team, that's great. But I think they're threatened, particularly by me because I am a lawyer, but also by coaches because lawyers just kind of think they can do it all.
And actually sitting with their client while they weep in their office and you're trying to provide support is not necessarily the skill set of a lawyer.
No. And that's, by the way, what lawyers really don't like to do.
Right?
They're like, here's a box of tissue, go to the bathroom. I mean, they don't know what to do with you.
What would you say? Let's just put our audience hat on that there is a lawyer listening to this conversation. What would you say to the family law professionals about the work you do and why they need to be open-minded about it?
Just like it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a team to get a family through divorce in the healthiest way. And there are, I don't know, if I quote statistics, I'm going to get them wrong, but I don't know, something like 700,000 divorces a year. in the United States. There's a lot of people getting divorced.
That's right.
You're not going to lose business. I promise you, you're not going to lose business. Will you make less money in a case that involves a coach? Yes, you probably will.
I hope so, because we work for the families. Yep.
But you're also going to get a more satisfied client. And when that client leaves and their best friend is getting divorced next year, that client's going to say, hey, you ought to go to this lawyer. I worked with this lawyer and this coach, and it wasn't so bad. And the lawyer was amazing. So instead of having clients, in divorce law, this is the other thing that I learned from practicing in different areas of the law. In divorce law, it is not uncommon for clients to change lawyers once, twice, 3 times in a case.
Wow.
That doesn't happen in other areas of law, I have to tell you. Like if a business client changes lawyers midstream, something was really off, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen, but it does in divorce. Why? Because the clients are so emotional and they project problems onto the lawyer that really it wasn't the lawyer's fault. And then it becomes hard for the lawyer when somebody is angry and upset with you. You don't want to call them and get your head chopped off, right? You're a human. And so you don't call them, and then they don't know what you know. And then everything just gets bigger and spirals, and it gets horrible. Lawyers would have a much easier job. They might not make as much money. They won't make as much money per case, but they'll have more cases, and there's plenty to go around. Their lives, their quality of life will be so much better, and their clients' quality of life will be better, and everybody will be happier. But it's a hard message to get lawyers to believe.
Yeah. Well, we're here to amplify it on the Good Divorce Show and hope that other people are taking this in. It is such a delight to be in conversation with a fellow pioneer who, we are here to disrupt this industry and to provide more options to you. And Karen, can you remind our listeners where they can find you, the details of your book, the program you've put together? Let's empower these people to have their own good divorce.
Yeah, the best place to find me is on my website, KarenCovy.com. And it's got all the things, right? You can find the book there. You can find the podcast there. You can find, articles. I have over 200 articles on divorce. I have over 200 videos on my YouTube channel, but everything is, you can find it all on the website. Go from there. The book is available on Amazon. You can also get it on my website. So everything you need is at KarenCovy.com.
And that's COVY, and the book, When Happily Ever After Ends, How to Survive Your Divorce Emotionally, Financially, and Legally. Any final words of wisdom for our audience today?
If I could leave people with anything, it's just the simple thought that this is your life and you're in charge, and you don't have to do it, go through a divorce any certain way. Right? You have the power to choose. You have the power to decide how you want this to go. If you want to do this at all, you are in charge of your own life, and you can be in charge of your own divorce. And if you will take that time and put in that energy, you're going to end up in such a better place when it's over.
Oh, beautiful. I want to celebrate you listeners for taking time in your day to invest in yourself in the very way that Karen has just identified. If you find the podcast valuable, please share it with others. Like on the podcast you're listening to, hop on over to thegooddivorcecoach.com, where I'm also here to support you. And remember, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Thanks for listening. Do you have questions or thoughts about this week's episode? Let us know by following the Good Divorce Coach on Facebook and Instagram at Good Divorce Coach, and leave a comment. And be sure to tune in every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific, or listen anytime wherever you get your podcasts.